been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Hello, everybody, online, on the air, and on podcast. It is the Get Ready for the Future show. My name is Scott Inman, along with Janet Walker, one of the co-founders of Gen Wealth Financial Advisors. Welcome in as we answer your questions about money, finance, investing, retirement. Nothing is off limits for us, and we hope you'll get your questions in to us. It's real easy to reach out. You can call or text to 501-381-5228. That's the number you need to know for a lot of reasons around Gen Wealth. 501-381-5228. You can call and leave a voicemail. We'll use that voicemail on the air. Or you can just text us your question to hear your questions answered on the air. There's also an email option for you, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Welcome in, Jan. It's been a few weeks since we had you on the air.
Yeah, I took some time off to spend some time with my daughter before she went to college, and so I'm glad to be back on the air.
Yeah, you've kind of hit the ground running too. I mean, I'm sure running a business and then jumping on the radio at the same time is probably a little bit of it's kind of a lot to do.
There were a few things waiting for me to come back. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we're glad to have you today. And we've got some good questions today, too. We're going to have a question about becoming a widow and dealing with retirement from that aspect. We've got a question about RILAs. So get ready for that one. If you haven't heard about what a RILA is, we're going to describe that for you. We've got a question about getting into the financial planning career, and also about how to withdraw money from an inherited IRA. So let's get started. Our first question comes from Michelle in Russellville. I'm 62 and lost my husband unexpectedly this year. I was planning to retire at the end of the year, but now I don't know if I can. I've got about $600,000 in my 401k and a little money in a Roth IRA. Can I still retire? What do I need to be aware of doing this on my own now? Well, first, our condolences, Michelle, for the loss of your husband. We know that if it was unexpected, especially, it can be a real shock to try to go through the grieving process and at the same time try to figure out your financial life. And I think so. The first thing I would say here, Janet, is if you don't already have a trusted financial advisor who can help you through this, we always believe in that in any aspect of life, but when you are particularly in this situation, grieving and not thinking clearly, you need some help. Yeah,
you absolutely do. Scott, just this past week, I had a meeting with a lady. I'm going to call her Mary. That's not her real name, but Mary has been a client of mine for probably 12 or 13 years now, quite a while. And her husband had been a client before that, but she didn't really have anything to invest. And so he would meet with me and she would come along with him, but she was just there on the appointments. That was it. And he passed away very unexpectedly. Frankly, it is very much like Michelle's story. And Scott, just this last week, when I was meeting with her, she began to tell me again, we talk about these types of things. She brings it up every year when we meet. She began to tell me again how when he passed away so unexpectedly, she said, Janet, I didn't know how to pay the bills. I didn't know what we had. I didn't know what we didn't have. I didn't know if I was supposed to pay something one time a month or twice a month and how often it was going to come, and property taxes. And I didn't know any of it because he handled all of that. And now here we are over a decade later, and she says, I don't really like sitting down and taking the time to do all of that, paying the bills and that type of thing. But she said, but I understand it. And she was reflecting back, and she has always toyed with whether she wants to move or not. She still lives in the home that they had together. And she said, if I had it to do again, I probably would have moved back then. And I said, Miss Mary, I probably would have told you not to in the first year. And she kind of looked at me funny, and I said, you had to make a lot of decisions that year. And that's a big one. Like the second year, okay. But in the first year, to not make those really big decisions. And her daughter always comes in with her on these appointments. And they both were like, yeah, you're right. That would have been too much to deal with. So from one vantage point, I share that just for the encouragement of you can get through this with an advisor, and hopefully maybe even with adult children to come along beside you as her daughter has and really help you through all of these changes, because it is a lot. If you've not been the one dealing with the finances, it's definitely a lot. But to come alongside you have the opportunity to have an advisor to work through all of this and help you think about things that you might not have even considered at this point.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, we don't know where Michelle is in this process. She's asking a question about retirement, and we're going to get to that portion of it. But, you talk about all the things that she's had to go through from those standpoints that you've already recognized, getting into online accounts and knowing passwords and finding statements. You don't have many paper statements anymore. A lot of those are coming only online. So finding all of that and getting it together, I don't know where you are on that road, Michelle, but we're going to just kind of focus in on the retirement part. But we wanted to talk a little bit there at the first about just getting somebody on your team to help you in the form of a trusted financial advisor can really be a benefit to you. Now, as far as the retirement question, she tells us $600,000 in the 401k and a little money in a Roth IRA. Well, that is a focus on assets, and we need to know those numbers, but we want to encourage you, as we encourage all pre-retirement clients to do, change your mindset from assets to income, because retirement is essentially an income problem. So we know the 401k account value. What we don't know is what other income sources are you going to have in retirement, Michelle? Do you have pension income for yourself, or do you get a survivor pension benefit from your spouse if he had one? What about Social Security? And Janet, this brings up a really big topic of conversation too, particularly in Michelle's situation. There are a lot of Social Security options that widows may have no idea about.
Right. And if you're at a point, Michelle, where maybe you think, okay, I can, after we do some research on the income sources, maybe I can make it, you would have the opportunity to take even a widow's benefit as a Social Security claiming strategy. I'm not telling you that that's what you need to do. It's very important to look at all of the choices that you have available to you, and Social Security is one decision of many that need to come together in your income plan for retirement, but we can certainly help you analyze that.
So once we take a look at what income sources that Michelle may have, and we're talking about guaranteed income sources that are not dependent upon what the 401k balance does, then we need to look at the other side of the equation and know what her required income is.
Right. So if you need, let's say that you need $3,000 a month, and there's not like a right or wrong answer. Your need is what it is, whatever that number is. Let's say you need to have $3,000 a month, and you already have $4,000 coming in from maybe Social Security and pensions. Then you're okay. You're ready, and we can look at what else can be done with the other assets that you have available to you. But let's say that you need $7,000 a month, and you have $4,000 coming in. Then there's a gap there, and we're going to have to solve for how do we fill that gap. There also might be a need to pay down some things before you retire so that maybe you don't have as much outflow each month. So there's a lot of variables there that need to be considered. Another one, Scott, is the cost of health insurance. Between Michelle's current age 62 and when she reaches age 65, that is something that a lot of people, they're thinking about their current monthly expenses now while their employer is probably paying the majority of their health insurance cost. But if you retire, that goes to you until you get to that Medicare point. And frankly, it still goes to you. It's just a smaller dollar amount.
Yeah. So let me also address, and we're talking about Michelle, who's recently widowed and asking if she can retire. When you think about couples still together and they still have each other right now, there are many client couples who one of the main reasons they chose to work with GenWealth is because they knew if one of them passed that the other would need the help, because they recognize that, as is typical in a married couple, one of the members of that couple is usually the one that deals with the money, and the other one doesn't really care or trust the other to the extent that they don't have to pay too much attention to it. And honestly, that's why the marriage probably has worked as long as it has as they get close to retirement. But we do know, and in most cases, It's not always, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but in most cases, it's the man that really did the money stuff.
Yeah, it usually is. Obviously, in my household, given what I do for a living, it's not that way, but it is very common for it to be the guy who deals with most of the financial decisions of the family in this particular generation, meaning the generation that's approaching retirement right now. So at Gen Wealth, we're in, I think, a little bit of an unusual situation in terms of the statistics of the industry. What we see, Scott, most of the time when a widow, in particular, when a widow comes in and wants to ask financial questions, if they haven't dealt with the money in the past, if the husband dealt with it and now they're doing this solo, many times they just want to deal with a female advisor. They just feel more comfortable in that situation. Industry-wide, female advisors, the statistics say 15 to 35%. I think 35 is extraordinarily high. I don't see that really in any of the situations where I know of particular offices, but at Gen Wealth, we're well above the 15%. We are 26% female advisors here. And again, I think that's a really high number. So all of that to say, if you want to meet with a male advisor, we got them. If you want to meet with a female advisor, we've got them. So whatever you're more comfortable with, and we try when possible to actually pair a male and female together so that both the husband and wife have somebody that they feel more comfortable relating to.
Well, we also have, and Michelle, thanks for your question. I would also encourage Michelle or anyone who's listening who is in a similar situation or anyone who's walking up to pre-retirement. We talked about getting the plan down, getting it on paper, on purpose, going through a process that we call the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process. If you'd like to step into that and have those conversations about income and matching the income to the assets so that you know what your monthly income is going to be in retirement, all you have to do to get started is reach out to us. Call toll-free 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. And we also, Janet, have another Gen Wealth event coming up very soon that talks about women's issues when it comes to finance. It's called the Enrich Women's Event on October 12th at the Chenal Event Venue. That's in Little Rock. And you want to talk a little bit about our keynote speaker?
Yeah, Scott, we've said for years that we are education driven, and that's why we do events like this. We want to enrich you, to empower you as women to know what to do with your finances. We're bringing in keynote speaker Jensen Hallett, and she often speaks at events to enrich and empower women with knowledge, with education. So we believe that that's a good team together. So we're going to have different financial topics that we're talking about. Jensen will have her topics that she discusses with you as well. And I think it's just going to be a great ladies' day out, if you will. So you can get that information. Again, the event is on October 12th at the Chenal Event Venue in West Little Rock. You can get information and register because we're going to have food for you. So we need you to register so we know how much food to get. You can go to getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. Getreadyforthefuture.com/academy and handle your registration there.
Moving on, our next question is from Grace in Little Rock. I've heard a lot of friends talking about RILAs. Can you explain what they are and how I would know if I need one? Grace, thanks very much. We did some research on this, and they've actually been around for quite some time, but they've been way more popular in the last 5 or 6 years. It stands for, RILA is an acronym, stands for Registered Indexed Linked Annuity. Okay, so let's start by talking what an annuity is, because you hear that word, and it still to this day, I think it's changing a little bit the way people look at that because they're getting educated, but certainly annuity conjures up positive thoughts for some people and negative thoughts for others, but you want to be educated rather than just having a feeling about a certain investment product. So an annuity at its base core, this is the way I describe it, it is a tax-deferred investment vehicle. So you think about non-qualified or non-retirement money. You have that sitting in your bank account. You have excess. You have more coming in. You want to add to your investments, and you can't get any more into the Roth IRA, into the 401k. This is a non-retirement account you're opening up. Well, if you open up an account, a brokerage account, and just buy stock or buy bonds or anything like that, and you trade that on any kind of frequent basis, you're going to generate potentially capital gains taxes along the way. So what an annuity would do, if you chose to put a lump sum into an annuity, let's say $100,000, you would be able to leave that alone and see it grow. And if you made changes inside of the annuity wrapper, it actually would be tax deferred. There'd be no taxes generated while it stayed in the annuity wrapper. Now, it does add the 59.5 age to it, just like an IRA or a 401k. So you can't take the money out of an annuity without that 10% early withdrawal penalty. So that's something to know about all annuities, okay? So the registered index-linked annuity, Janet, is the same, but while RILAs are relatively new, there's kind of an updated version to it here. So if you think about an old indexed annuity, so just an indexed annuity basically was kind of the first run at what RILAs kind of played off of. An indexed annuity basically allowed you to put money into an annuity, lock it up for a certain surrender period, and that's another thing you need to know about an annuity is that there are surrender periods associated with it, that if you take money out of it before those surrender periods are over, you're going to be penalized for doing so too until it is in out of surrender. When you put that money in over a certain term, let's say again $100,000 just to make it easy, you would be able to be credited to an index. Your money would be attached to an index but not directly invested into an index like the S&P 500. You can't invest directly into an index, but the annuity company will credit you the performance of that S&P 500 index in that example. Over, let's say, a year's time, they'll take a look at point to point what the index did. And if it was up 5%, they might give you a portion of it, or they might give you a capped piece of that performance on the upside. And on the downside, there's 100% protection. You cannot lose money, of course, subject to the paying ability of the insurance company offering that deal. But that was the indexed annuity. So now the registered index-linked annuity has changed the top and bottom of that, okay? So rather than a 100% downside buffer, maybe you get 20. Maybe you get 10, 15, 5. In many cases, depending on the issuer of it, you get the choice of many of those buffers. Let's use the 20%. So over the course of the term, whether it's 1 year, 3 year, or more frequently 6 years, you might get a 20% downside buffer, meaning if you put $100,000 in and over the course of that term, the market is down 19%, the insurance company would refund your money and you would not lose. If it's down 22%, you would actually lose 2%. So the first 20% is protected. But on the upside, there's oftentimes no cap. And what we've seen as these products have become more popular, Janet, is that there's even a participation kicker, if you will, in which you might actually do better than the index performs over that term.
And so we really like, Scott, the concept of a RILA for that growth and the protection, because think about it, if you can get the positive performance from whatever the index is doing and potentially even get extra on top of that, but know that you have a floor that if it goes the other direction, you're protected against, as your example, the first 20% of loss. That's an incredible opportunity that gives people, I think, a little bit more peace of mind with investing, to just be able to go, okay, let me just be over here in the shallow end of the pool. I don't have to jump in with the deep end. So it gives you an opportunity to have that exposure without taking on as much risk.
Yeah, we are using those in our clients' plans, and again, they can be good for growth, which gives you the opportunity for people who are still in accumulation mode to use, and they can be good for protection for people who are in retirement and are a little bit more risk averse, we shall say. So they can be used for a variety of investor types, but again, the downside here that you need to know, there is the surrender period that we talked about, and that means the money is not liquid. So if you're in your 30s or 40s, you certainly don't want to lock up the bulk of your money in that type of vehicle, because you might need some of it before you get to 59.5, right? So you might want it with some of your money, but not all of your money, and that would certainly need to be worked out through the planning process. And it works very well for non-qualified money, but as we already mentioned, you cannot expect to make those withdrawals until 59.5. You can exchange to other products, so there is an annuity exchange. If you stayed inside an annuity for that time frame, you wouldn't be penalized. But the answer, again, comes down to planning. Whether the question from Grace was, how to know if she needs one, the answer is through a financial plan that is curated for you specifically, with a retirement date put out there, an asset level you're trying to ascertain, and an income that is going to be sent to you through sources like Social Security, maybe a pension like we talked about in our last question, and through your assets. It's all put together through that Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process, Janet, that we talked about earlier in the show.
Absolutely. And I think Grace got our question of the week. What
She
did she
did.
get?
Yeah, congratulations, Grace. We are going to send you a Get Ready for the Future show tumbler for being the question of the week. We need you to claim it and just send us an email to do that, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. And if you have questions, if you'd like to be like Grace and get a free tumbler or hear your question on the air, just call or text us a question. You can call and leave a voicemail, or you can text it 501-381-5228. Maybe you'll hear your question answered on the Get Ready for the Future show. We also have the email option, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Well, usually we have 4 questions, and I can already tell you we're only going to have 3 today. Not because we were necessarily long-winded, Janet, but we do have a little shorter version of the show because of radio formatting issues this week. So here's our last question of the day. John from Cabot. I'm looking to get into the financial planning career field. What is a little bit of advice you would give someone new to the industry? Well, it's a great career. I'll tell you that first of all, and it's never too, I don't know, John doesn't say how old he is, but I can tell you as someone who made the career change in his, we'll say early 40s. It was probably closer to mid 40s, but we'll call it early 40s. I can attest to the great fulfillment you can have working with someone to achieve their financial goals. And the reality is they're needed, John. 38% of financial advisors expect to retire within the next 10 years. So there is a huge need for new advisors, for new financial planners to enter the field. There are going to be a lot of people who really run one-man show operations who are retiring, and those clients are going to be left out in the cold if there's not a plan for them. But Janet, I think for John, some qualifications or some things that you really kind of need to look inward at first is understanding yourself.
Yeah, understanding yourself, and then we're also going to talk about understanding the industry. As far as you are concerned personally, you really need to think about what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Scott, we didn't talk about this, but I'm going to use you as an example. Scott, having been the anchor on the newscast before he came here, that was the #1 station in the state for 17 years, something like that. And so he obviously, as a strength, he could have listed that he was a very good communicator. That is critical for somebody who wants to be an advisor. So if communication is a challenge for you, then that's something that you've got to look at and go, is that a strength or a weakness now maybe that I can develop? And a lot of times you can't really take a pure weakness and turn it into a strength, but you can get it to a level that is acceptable. And that's what you have to ask is, what are my weaknesses and how are they going to impact me? And then what are your strengths? Scott, one of your weaknesses at the time, and this wasn't your fault, it would be the case for anybody new to the industry, is you came in and we were talking in acronyms and you were like, could y'all just speak English? Because we have a ton of acronyms. So understanding the language of the industry, well, that was a weakness that Scott could pretty quickly overcome. So it was fine. So think about yourself in those ways. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And are you able to shore up those weaknesses, or are they weaknesses that don't even matter in this industry? And then looking at the industry itself, the challenge of understanding the industry, there are a lot of opportunities for you, even in Central Arkansas, to work as a financial advisor, but you need to understand things like, how do you get paid? So are you paid purely on commission, or are you going to have a salary base? If you have a salary base, does that salary base go away at some point, or is it there permanently? We believe that it is critical for an advisor to have a salary base and one that does not go away. And the reason is, we don't ever want an advisor in a situation where they have to sell a product to clients, to investors that maybe the investors don't really need, but that advisor is thinking, I got to make my house payment, so I need to sell this. We're not ever going to put you in that situation because we don't want our clients in that situation. So we provide a salary-based approach that will be supplemented with additional income on top of that, but that way our advisors aren't ever in a pressured situation. I would also look at what we call the washout rate in whatever firm you're considering working at. Without naming any names, there are some companies that have a 3 out of 4 washout rate. So how did those 3 not make it, and how do you make sure that you're the one? Or do you want to go somewhere where they don't have a very high washout rate? That's very important to understand. Scott, you want to talk a little bit about kind of what does the day look like, for an advisor day in, day out?
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking too, the industry you were talking about understanding the industry. I think the industry has changed, and you would be able to speak to this more than me because you've been in it longer. But I think the idea that, and I'm glad that John phrased the field as financial planning. I think having a focus on that is so important. That's what we do here. We are not investment gurus. Investment strategies is what we build, and we use the investment gurus to help develop that strategy and manage that strategy, because we are planners first and foremost, and then on the other side of that, we're relationship managers, because that's back to the communication thing. That's what this industry is about, is having a great understanding of the clients you work with and helping them achieve their goals matters more than really picking a certain stock or picking a certain investment. Those are all important, but the strategy can be developed without being totally really with the, as we like to say, the curtains drawn and the lights dimly lit and your head stuck in the charts and the technical analysis. We let somebody else do that and work on that. So, John, if you're looking to get into that financial planning career, I would certainly suggest considering that as well. Walked right past that final bell. Really didn't get through 3 questions today. We were trying to get through 4, but a little bit shorter version of the show today. So time for the final thoughts, and Janet, we'll start with you.
I'll use this time to elaborate a little bit more for John from Cabot here. We talk about the Gen Wealth difference for our clients, that we are education-driven, strategy-based, and team-delivered. I think we are the same thing for new advisors coming into the industry. We are very education-based. We want to make sure that you get through your tests, but that's not the end of your learning. Learning here is career-long. It happens the rest of the time that you're working here. And so we want to help you do those things in very much an apprenticeship-style process. So think about, if you're considering entering the industry, how do you learn? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And be sure you understand the company where you're going to work.
I'm going to use for my final thought another reminder of the Enrich Women's event that is coming up October 12th at the Chenal event venue. We're going to have a keynote speaker, Jensen Hallett, and she is going to talk to the women in attendance about women and finances. And you can visit getreadyforthefuture.com/academy to sign up for that. Space is limited at the event venue. Where, as Janet mentioned earlier, we're going to serve food there, so we need to know who's coming. So please sign up. It's free to attend, food and a keynote speaker on October 12th at Chenal event venue. You can sign up there, and you can also go to that same address, getreadyforthefuture.com/academy, to find all of our upcoming events. And that is all the time we have for this week's Get Ready for the Future show. We thank you for being with us. And a reminder again, if you have questions, get them to us, 501-381-5228. Call or text them and hear your question answered on the air. See you next time.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com, or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and Gen Wealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.